Bueno, for today's AMA, we're gonna be introducing ourselves. Even if the people here joining us, you also are gonna have the chance to if you want, to speak up, tell us where you come from, how did you get here, and why are you in LAOS server, which we're very grateful to have you here. We will also be giving a small background of what is LAOS, how did LAOS become what it is now, and what is Freeverse and how they are linked to each other, and then we will continue. We will proceed to have anyone ask their questions, and in case if there are not any questions around there, we have gathered a few questions from Twitter and Discord that we have had in our private chats, so we'll go with them. This AMA session is going to last 30 minutes. So after that, the session will be done for today. But again, we're going to be having weekly sessions, so we will have more opportunities to get to ask them in the team, right? So with no further ado, Alun Evans, CEO at Freeverse, the technical team behind LAOS. Feel free to introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Nacho. Super. Great to have everyone here. Yeah, my name's Alun. I'm the CEO of Freeverse. Before we get into asking questions and answering them, I'm just going to maybe give you a super quick 2-minute intro to Freeverse and LAOS and the relationship between the two and so on. Hopefully that'll answer a few questions. Nacho, can you mute yourself quickly? I'm hearing a bit of echo. Super. Yes. So yeah, great. So LAOS is a project born out of Freeverse. Freeverse was founded in 2019. We started off as a gaming company originally, and our vision back then was, wouldn't it be cool if we could make a sports management game where you could buy and sell the players of your team as if you do in the real life with real money, right? So we rapidly fell in love with the blockchain and the possibilities behind that and Web3, because that was the answer to enabling that vision without becoming a bank, right? And we fell in love with the whole decentralized movement and the concept behind it, and it was very important, and we thought it was really cool. So we built our game, and we built the technology behind it. It was a game called Goal Revolution, and we launched it back in 2020. I think we launched it before the whole bull run on NFTs and so on that came. It was around that time, just after CryptoKitties. So we sort of took inspiration from that a little bit. And yeah, after a while, for about a year, the game did fairly well. But after a year, we realized that the technology we built probably had more value for not just gaming companies, but also brands and other builders in the space. Because what we built was a whole layer 2. We built our own layer 2 that was EVM compatible, and we launched on EVM chains. And so we created a whole platform based around that layer 2, all around basically making tradable assets like NFTs as easy and as quick to trade as possible at scale. And that went kind of well, and we have several clients now where we have like the car manufacturer Cupra, the digital celebrity company Hyperreal, and several games that are being built on the layer 2 on the platform. But about a year ago, we realized we wanted to be better connected to the Web3 space and become more decentralized. So around about a year ago, we started working on a plan to basically transition away from being a layer 2 to being a layer 1. And we looked around and very quickly identified Polkadot as the best technological ecosystem where we could envision that dream. And so we started building in Polkadot. We sent quite a few of our engineers away on the Substrate Builders program, and they've all graduated. And so, yeah, we've been building and building and building. And on Monday, we announced LAOS to the world. We're very, very proud of what it could be and what it can be. And yeah, we're very happy to answer any questions. And so any questions you have, and then feel free to jump in, introduce yourself, ask a question. And if not, as Nacho said, we already have several questions that have been asked already, on either privately by Discord or on LinkedIn or on Twitter. So we have a backlog of questions to go through. But yeah, so any questions that you have after that brief intro, we're happy to answer them and dive into discussion. Silence. Maybe Nacho, we can start from one of the questions that was asked in advance.
Yeah, I wanted to give 3 seconds to see if someone wanted to go ahead. but I see that people are still a little shy here. So we can proceed to answer any of the questions that we've been asked before. But again, if any of you guys come up with a question, interrupt Alun, and we go straight forward. We want to prioritize your questions since you guys are here. In the meantime, the first question that we have even got from LinkedIn and the community is, but how is LAOS different from any other blockchain, and why is it now the time to announce LAOS?
Yeah, so I'm going to combine that with the first question that the Maxime V has just asked in the chat. He says, "I saw LAOS has different chains. What are they and what they do?" So that's a good way to jump into what is LAOS exactly and how is it different. So LAOS is a parachain, or will be a parachain on Polkadot. And it has two features that we are using from within Polkadot from within Polkadot's sort of approach and technology to make it stand out. The first is that we are using Polkadot's XEM v3, and particularly the universal location, in order to seamlessly connect without bridges to different chains, right? So the vision of LAOS is that LAOS should be where the properties of asset tokens are stored, whereas the ownership of those tokens can be managed on other chains, right? We can do that with universal location, and that's kind of cool. And that means that you can mint an asset on LAOS within the whole Polkadot ecosystem, and at the same time, that asset can be traded and lent and staked and sent on a different chain, right? Any chain you want, in theory. And we started by building out with EVM chains such as Ethereum and Polygon, but there's no reason that can't go to other chains. And then to go specifically to Maxime V's question, what's interesting about LAOS eventually is that it will be essentially taking Polkadot's model of being a relay chain and duplicating it within Polkadot, right? So the vision for LAOS and the way we make it more scalable is that LAOS in itself is a parachain, but eventually LAOS itself will be a relay chain. And it will spin off several what we call Evo chains around that relay chain in order to sort of mimic that sort of sharding approach there. And that should bring it up to a much, much higher throughput. And so the advantage of that, and when you combine those two things, the central, if you like a pattern, you can call it a specialized second order relay chain in a way. If you combine that pattern with the universal location, what that means is that you can mint a huge number of assets in LAOS, paying the gas in LAOS, which will be quite cheap because it's very, very high throughput. But the ownership of those assets is managed in any other chain you want. And you don't have to pay gas to mint the assets in that other chain, right? You have to create the collection in that other chain, but you don't have to pay gas. So all those assets can be minted at a massive scale. You can literally mint millions and millions and millions of assets on Ethereum without having to pay any ETH beyond the ETH you paid for creating the collection in the first place. So I hope that answers your question, Maxime, and I hope that answers your question as well, Nigel.
You got it.
We got a follow-up, Maxime. I think see Maxime's typing in the chat. Thank you, sir. Yeah, you're more than welcome. Super. Let's go to the next one, Nat.
Yeah. So next one would go, how would you elaborate on the Bridgeless connectivity feature of LAOS and its benefits?
Yeah, so the Bridgeless thing is quite an important one. And the two real benefits I see for LAOS are the Bridgeless minting and the metadata extension, right? So maybe we can treat that one in the next question. We'll talk about the Bridgeless minting first. The Bridgeless minting works, as I mentioned earlier on, uses the universal location feature of XEM v3. And to make that work, what you have to do is you have to create what we call a universal node, right? So it's a regular blockchain node which combines two things. It combines, on the one hand, a regular EVM node, right? So any old EVM compatible nodes. At the moment, the current builds, as I mentioned, we are supporting Ethereum and Polygon. And at the same time, in the same node, you have a twin there, which is the LAOS node. And so what that means is that node understands everything that a regular EVM node understands, and you can do everything that you could do with a regular EVM node. But it also understands those additional calls that are required to make sense of the universal location, right? And so what that means is that when you use that node to, for example, create a collection, let's just take it as a very simple example that is being built as the very first app on LAOS at the moment, which is live. You can see it from our website, the Bridgeless Minter. You can create a collection in either Ethereum or Polygon, and that collection is created using basically a standard ERC-721 contract. And at the same time, you also create a collection within LAOS, right? And so the two things, it's like a sibling collection, if you like. The two things exist simultaneously. The difference is that the data, the token URI in the ERC-721 in the EVM node is essentially a pointer to the LAOS collection. So once those assets are being minted in the LAOS collection, they're automatically updating the token or from the token URI, which is already stored in the ERC-721 contract in the EVM node. And what that means essentially is that once you've created that collection in your EVM chain, the actual minting happens in LAOS, and you can mint and mint and mint. I think it's the total number of assets per collection, if I'm not wrong, is 2 to the power of 96. So you can mint 2 to the power of 96 assets on Ethereum essentially without paying any ETH beyond the original collection. I hope that answers your question. I see we have 2 questions that are being typed at the moment in the chat. So, Nat, do you want to answer one more question whilst we wait for those 2 words to be typed out?
Well, yeah, you mentioned about the extended metadata. That is something that is one of the biggest also features about LAOS. If you wanna bring that up, or we can proceed to the questions first. F was asking, does this mean that I can pay just one time in ETH and then all means I pay in LAOS?
That's correct. Yes. So once you've minted that collection in Ethereum, then after that, then you don't have to pay any more ETH. Right, so you just have to pay. You can pay in LAOS tokens, and because of the throughput of LAOS is so much higher than Ethereum, right? Eventually, theoretically, we mentioned on the website 1 million TPS, 1 million transactions per second. That's a theoretical maximum based on the theoretical maximum of Polkadot, because we're replicating Polkadot's structure within the relay chain. Sorry, within the parachain. So there's a theoretical limit of 1 million TPS once we go with the full sharding approach. Let's see. Many other chains claim very high theoretical limits, but theory is there for a reason. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, no worry, man on the moon. Can't join. Sorry, we'll watch it afterwards. Well, hopefully we can answer all the questions, and hopefully that answers Bridget's question as well. Super.
Okay, we got F's question answered, and now we have Maxim typing for another question. Which will be out here soon. We got someone from the Kusama Kingdom. Welcome. Okay, Maxim is here. What use cases do you have in mind for the LAOS chain? That was actually one of the questions we've been asked before. So please, Alun, go for it.
Yeah. So there are 3 principal use cases I see, and I'll go in order of my least excited to most excited. Right. So we'll start with the least excited feature. The use case. The first is for existing collectibles, right? I'm not a massive fan of digital collectibles. That's because I don't collect things in the real world, right? But I think there is a use case there. People do collect things in the real world, and obviously there has been a use case for digital collectibles in the virtual world now with the NFT bull market and so on. And I think the first thing that LAOS is metadata extensions can do is give new life to existing collectibles. So you can, for example, have a collectibles, whether it's a Bored Ape or whatever it is. You can then add a metadata which represents something different happening to it. So it's like maybe you can add a Christmas hat to your Bored Ape, for example. We're going to Christmas. And I think that's an interesting way of breathing new life and breathing dynamism into collectibles. It's turning existing static collectibles into something that's dynamic. And maybe we can talk about how the metadata extension works later on. The next use case, which I'm more excited about, is gaming, right? I think we still really haven't seen, Web3 gaming break out yet as well as it should do. I think gamers are kind of against, they've not taken kindly to NFTs or the use case for NFTs we saw, which is all speculation. But I do think there's such a strong benefit to the average gamer of owning their own content. And I think LAOS's features of being able to scale and connect to all different blockchains, right? That's one, and the metadata extension opens up really fascinating possibilities of taking the assets from existing games that have been tokenized on whatever chain, and then using the metadata extension to expand their data so that those assets can be used permissionlessly in a different game. So if you have a car in one racing game, there is literally nothing that can stop another racing game coming along, adding their own metadata to that token, obviously without treading on the IP of that of the original game. But then, given that the token belongs to the actual owner and the metadata has been extended by a consensus system, then they can bring that token into a different game. So I think it opens up these cross gaming and cross platform possibilities, which I'm super excited about. So I think that's quite a strong use case. And but the use case I'm really interested in is the idea of real world assets, right? I think there's going to be this is both a feeling and also a reflection from having seen what's happening. I think we're going to see a lot more tokenization of real world assets in the future, right? Whether it's going to be tokenization of invoices or tokenization of receipts or bills of lading or logistics or supply chain documents, or whether it's tokenization of financial instruments, whether it's going to be debt, whether it's going to be mortgages, whether it's real estate. I think there's going to be lots more of tokenization. Just for example, right? I was speaking to some guy at a conference last week, and he does he works in the whole carbon credits world, right? And he's in Finland, and his company do carbon credits for Nordic countries, and within the Nordic countries, there's quite a well-established legal framework for how the trading of those carbon credits work. But he wants to trade with companies in Spain or Italy or the Philippines or the States or Brazil or wherever it is, and there's not yet that legal framework for trading carbon credits between those companies at distance. However, if you tokenize those carbon credits, you suddenly have an environment where you don't need that legal framework, right? But you have the decentralized, trustless system, which is the blockchain, which enables you to give a way for those assets and those tokens to be traded. And I think for that to happen, you need to have tokenization at a huge scale, and you need to have flexible tokenization where that token can be extended and the metadata can be extended. And I think that's the use case that I'm super excited about. I think that LAOS is really well positioned to attack those use cases in the future. So yeah, so I agree with you too, Maxime. Real world assets are going to drive the market. So that's my feeling and my hope. Yeah, super.
Right.
Let's go on next.
Yes, let me unmute myself real quick. Okay, next question. You mentioned earlier that you can mint your asset as an ERC 721. Deeper on that, what other types of assets can be created on the LAOS network?
Yeah, it's a great question. In theory, any asset that requires some sort of external token URI is an asset that can be created on LAOS, right? Because ultimately, you can think of LAOS as a way of sending messages and receiving messages from other chains, right? So when you're minting an asset on LAOS, if that asset is on another chain, if that asset is requesting data from another chain, such as an ERC 721 or 1155 with their token URIs, then instead of pointing to a private server or pointing to IPFS, they're pointing directly to LAOS, right? And so LAOS is a way of receiving that, being the data source for that other chain. So that can be any contract or token you want. And then on the other way, LAOS also sends information. So you can have any token, any standard you want on a different chain, and LAOS can extend the metadata permissionlessly on that contract. So what that's doing in this situation, LAOS is now sending data that way. You're adding data to that asset. So the Bridgeless meeting means that the LAOS will be the source of data to receive from one direction, and the metadata extension is when it allows is sending data back, pointing back towards the original source. And so ERC 721s are the obvious choice because it's a very flexible standard, which can be used for many different use cases. But yeah, there's no reason why it could be any other ERC standard that comes along, or any other use case. And I'm sure, and I hope in the future we'll see many more use cases with different standards.
Amazing. Thanks for that. Another question that we got from Twitter was, can you discuss the security measures implemented in LAOS to protect data and user transactions?
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually, and that's one of the reasons. I'm glad that question was asked, because that's one of the reasons that we chose Polkadot actually as an ecosystem. When we were looking around a year ago, essentially there were three different options for what we wanted to do. We could go on our own, right? Create our own chain from nowhere, right? And create our entire own ecosystem, which is one option. We could go with Cosmos, right? Or we could go with Polkadot. And we chose Polkadot for many reasons. There are two principal reasons. One is that I believe very strongly in the dot ecosystem. I believe strongly in the concept of, I like the fact that the dot is a software and not a security, as it's been reported quite widely. My camera disappeared, but I'm going to carry on speaking anyway, so it doesn't matter. And the other thing, the other reason was security, right? And one of the advantages of building a parachain on Polkadot, is that you are inheriting the security, the battle-tested security of the Polkadot ecosystem from day one, right? And so that security, if we had gone on Cosmos, we would have had to implement that security ourselves, which is just more work, right? And so that's one of the reasons we chose Polkadot was security. Yeah.
Okay. That would be aligned to another question, which was, how does LAOS address the legal and regulatory challenges associated with blockchain and digital assets? This is kind of aligned to what you already mentioned, but if you want to dig deeper in here before we go to the next question.
Yeah, there's still the legal and regulatory stuff is a bit of a minefield right now. In Europe, we have where we're based. So Freeverse is based in Spain, in Barcelona, and in Europe we have the new MiCA regulation, which is coming in to help provide more clarity. I think clarity there is kind of useful in certain respects. But you have to tread very carefully now, because you need to make sure that you're not a security token. You want to be a utility token. The SEC in the States is, of course, can't decide what it's doing. It's generally being quite hostile, but then it's not. One of the advantages of LAOS in terms of legal and regulatory stuff is that it helps. The whole metadata extension helps provide clarity to that situation, and I think it's going to be quite useful from a copyright perspective. You will be able to, with LAOS, to permissionlessly create a copyright claim on another item. Say someone mints something on Ethereum, right? And it's violating your copyright. Then with LAOS, you'll be able to have a decentralized register of a claim that you're saying this is my copyright, right? So I think that feature will be quite powerful. And so yeah, I think that I'm very interested to see how that evolves. LAOS itself, even though Freeverse is building LAOS itself is a foundation. The LAOS Foundation exists in Zug in Switzerland, and the purpose of that foundation is eventually to become decentralized and eventually to regulate that token. So we'll be following that the legal and regulatory stuff quite carefully. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Well, we're not having any questions on the chat, but I proceed because we still have a few. Another interesting question that we haven't brought up yet, which is how can developers get involved with building on LAOS, and what resources are available for them?
Yes, super great question. So for developers, the first thing that they are going to be using is to be connected to the universal node, right? So the universal node, as I mentioned earlier on, is this two-in-one node, where it's a LAOS node and an EVM node. And the advantage of it is that we've designed it on purpose so that if you are a dApp developer on an EVM chain right now, you can literally just change the URL that you're using to point towards the node, right? So instead of pointing to a standard EVM node somewhere else, you can point to the universal node, and everything you've been doing will just work, right? With just a single change of URL, everything will work as it was working before, right? Nothing will change. It's a standard EVM node. So in terms of integration, technical integration, to get started, it's super trivial. And then after that, of course, if you want to start taking advantage of the Bridgeless minting and the metadata extension, then you can start making calls to that universal node that use the half of that node, which is the LAOS node. So as LAOS, we announced it on Monday. We went live in Kusama. We're treating Kusama as a kind of a test environment for the time being. And we're gradually developing more and more things and rolling out. And of course, as we develop more features of the universal node and develop more examples for that as well, then we'll also develop other documentation. So yeah, of course, eventually there will be as before we go live in Polkadot in March or April, then there will be a whole suite of documentation and demos that developers can follow. And and now one of our jobs here at Freeverse is to start reaching out. We have quite a lot of contacts already from all of our go-to-market stuff from the last 2 years, and so we're reaching out to many of those contacts and more contacts with the new use cases to try and get as many people to start building on LAOS from day one. Which is the final point on that as well, which is kind of cool. All of the clients we have in our layer 2 are very excited about LAOS and will be transitioned towards LAOS as well straight away. So basically, from the get-go, from the launch of LAOS, there will be companies and games using LAOS and using the token straight away, which is kind of cool. So we're not coming from a cold start. We're coming from quite a hot start, which is quite exciting.
Super. We're about to close the 30 minutes, but we have one last question that I've also been asked in Twitter myself, which was, how does LAOS token function within the ecosystem, and what are its use cases? I think it's also something very important for the people that are here with us today.
Yeah. So the LAOS token will be launched with the chain. It's a utility token. We are planning to do a crowd loan if the crowd loan still exists in March and April. I think it will. But I think we're planning to go towards a crowd loan. And then we'll launch the chain, and after that, we'll likely do some sort of public sale for the token as well. We'll see that in our interest. And so the function of the token initially will be to pay the gas fees for the LAOS network, right? So everybody wants to use LAOS will need to pay with the LAOS token. And eventually, whilst we're starting off with more centralized aspects, eventually the goal is that the LAOS Foundation will become fully decentralized, and that the token will have some sort of governance and decision-making properties as well. So anyone who's interested in that, they go to the LAOSnetwork.io, our homepage, or LAOSfoundation.io, the foundation homepage. They can go straight to our token Gitbook, which is a live document which describes all the tokenomics, how the token will work, what the vesting schedules are, what the split is, what the distribution is, what the inflation procedures are, and so on and so forth. And there's quite a lot of documentation there, which is interesting. It's been worked through quite detailed, in a very detailed way, by a company called Web3 Studios, based in Switzerland, who are kind of experts in this and done this several times before. And so we're fairly happy with the tokenomics and the mature tokenomics. And so anyone have any questions about that, then please go to that live tokenomic document and check it out.
Super. Thank you very much, Alun. That were all the questions for today. Again, if you have any further questions, you will have the chat. We're here connected all the time for you. We will be bringing more news for developers, for the ambassador program in the upcoming few days and weeks. Stay tuned. Next week, this same time, we have another event. It's going to be more product focused with other two teammates from Freeverse. We're going to be showing how the Bridgeless minter works. Something related to the video that Alun sent earlier today or this week. So it's going to be pretty exciting. Stay tuned for that one. And well, thank you very much, Alun, and thank you everyone for joining. Again, any questions, let us know on the chat.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Thank you for coming. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.